going to help you make product demos better. Boom. And everyone just wanted to do it. It's the same concept that got us to be ranked first on Product Hunt twice, just as we launched, and a couple of months later when we launched a wider platform. Everything just kept coming back, to it's not just having a cool design, and it's not just getting a press release up somewhere. It's really putting heart and thought into your language and how you broadcast things to your audience.
Welcome to Entrepreneur's Handbook podcast, where we share inspiring startup stories with practical takeaways for you, the listener. Today's guest is Yoav Vilner. He's the CEO and founder of Walnut. It's a codeless, failure-free, 100% customizable sales demo platform. They've already raised $21 million in funding so far, having just completed their Series A round. Yoav started his entrepreneurship journey at the tender age of 21, through founding a marketing agency that went on to represent some of the largest startups in Israel. After several years of this, he decided he wanted something more scalable, and that's what led him to Walnut. I hope you enjoy listening today. Welcome to Entrepreneur's Handbook, Yoav. It's a pleasure to have you here.
All right, thanks for having me.
So I know you started in marketing right at the beginning of your career, and then you've gone on to build several startups, and your latest one is Walnut. I'm curious about how you got into entrepreneurship in the first place, and if you could walk us through that journey, that would be amazing.
My journey started actually kind of by accident when I was 21, and I was doing completely other things, having different plans for my life. And I noticed a little gap. I was living in Tel Aviv. I noticed a little gap between the fact that Israel was turning into a startup nation and everyone was starting to raise seed rounds. Obviously, it's a decade ago, so the numbers were different. And from the other way, I saw that not a lot of people knew how to do marketing that's specifically tailored for startups. There was like huge ad agencies, but they were not startup friendly, and there was barely any CMOs. So me and a friend, we started being like freelancers, and we just learned as we went what is growth marketing, what is tech marketing, and stuff that are just plain different than any other company needs. And so we started as freelancers, and the thing is, it was a combination of timing and the brand and the positioning that we were building. And it just turned out to be the first company and the biggest company in Israel to do that. So we had like 600 startups working with us, and offices in London and offices in New York as well. And that, I was the CEO there for like 7 years. And that was the reason I stepped into the industry in the first place.
What do you think enabled you to be successful? Like when you had all these huge 600 startups, so obviously you had a first mover advantage in some ways, but what things did you do that really helped build those relationships and gain those clients in the early days?
We were very aggressive in terms of how we got clients and the amounts of clients that we got in a short period of time and everything. I was trying to be very creative with building the brand from day one. So people really loved, the tone of voice was kind of rude and funny, and we had a little gnome as a logo, and it just became like a thing. Like startups had FOMO if they didn't hire us. It was kind of amazing to see it conceived from, startups asking what the hell is tech marketing? Do I need it? And all the way to a whole industry. There's now like hundreds of similar agencies. But it was fun. And, I also got to write for outlets like Inc. magazine, Forbes magazine, and others, mostly about like marketing and startups. But eventually, after 7 years of being the CEO there, it was time for me to try and do something else.
Yeah. And how was that transition? So I guess you've been doing it for so long. Did you start to get an itch to start something new? And because obviously your role at the beginning of that marketing agency would be very different to how it was at the end, because you'd be like, you had offices in multiple countries, you had multiple staff. Did you have an itch to start something afresh again?
Yeah, it was also, I think that 7 years is like a lot, like period. It's a lot for everyone to do the same thing. And the other thing is, it was a successful company, but it wasn't something that could scale and, reach like hundreds and hundreds of employees and make a, like a global impact, because it's that sort of a business. So for me, the next thing was to go ahead and start building like, more like technology based startups.
And I guess because you'd worked with so many startups, were you learning lessons along the way? So because you'd been working with over 600 startups, you saw the mistakes they made. It was almost a good learning experience for you, right? Because it was that like vicarious experience. Was there anything from that which you then took into when you built your own company, and that's really helped you?
Oh yeah, pretty much everything. Like, first of all, I got to make every possible mistake as a CEO in my early 20s in that company, and mostly things I would have done otherwise. But for me, they taught me everything I needed to know about managing people and managing, and vision and building a brand and everything. And the second thing, I just learned so much about marketing and about launching products and about brand and positioning and everything. That like, and this is what I'm hearing for the market now, that it's very clear that at Walnut there is there's someone that knows how to do this stuff, but from day one, because eventually every startup like would fill in for the gaps and hire a CMO and hire a whole marketing department when there's enough funds raised. I think that not enough founders care about positioning your startup and building a brand from day one, which is usually a big differentiator against competitors. And this is what it helped me to do in Walnut since day one.
So how did the process go? Did you hand over the reins of your first company to somebody else, or was it like closing up, or how did the actual transition work?
Yeah, so me and my partner, we sold our shares, and I actually had another company in between. Like, I was doing something as a founding CMO, but after about a year and a half afterwards, I realized I want to be in charge of the roadmap, the vision, the name, everything, and this is my passion. So I launched my third company as a CEO.
You mentioned the name there. What's behind the name of Walnut?
If I have to like cut it down to one sentence, I would just say that for us, showing your product is the toughest nut to crack, and we try and help our customers do it.
So your background is marketing, but obviously Walnut has a heavy like technical expertise as well, and with all the program behind it. Were you able to use the people that you met from the previous job, your previous role, to then find the right people to build the startup that you wanted in the future? Or how was that process of building that initial product?
Yeah, building the initial product was done by my co-founder, CTO. For me, it was a natural complementary co-founder. And in terms of like our founding team, we were very lucky and privileged to actually get people that we really wanted, and they wanted to work with us even before we had the funding in. And we really wanted them to build, each in their own turf, to build out a whole new team, whether the first engineer and head of marketing and VP sales and biz dev and whatever you can imagine, head of product, obviously. And we just brought on super, super smart people. Some of them we knew from previous experiences. So what I'm saying is that we were very lucky in our founding team that we, got a hold of people that we really wanted to work with from previous experiences. Some of them I know for like a decade. Some of them my co-founder used to work with in his previous ventures. And then when we started building our brand from day one, we also saw a lot of inbound from other talents that we took in.
Nice. So how long was it before you said you built the brand from day one? Was there a overlap where you were working for the marketing agency and building Walnut on the side? Or did you leave the marketing agency and then start Walnut completely fresh and it was your full focus right from the very beginning?
Oh, it was very fresh. It was like 2 years after I left my first company. So there was no relations. And I was also doing a startup in between for about a year as a founding CMO. But, for me, Walnut was the thing to do and leave everything else for that purpose.
In terms of the actual steps you took at the beginning to build your brand from day one, what were the main steps you think people should take on the beginning of their journey?
Realizing how important it is. Like, don't do it just because someone else told you it's good. Like, you have to realize that your company should be positioned from day one. You should have a clear message about what you're trying to solve. You should have a tone of voice that's kind of unique. It doesn't have to be either just serious or just, funny, but something that separates you from competition. something that's more memorable. And this is not these are all not they don't require you to like hire a full scale branding agency right now. You can just, if you just have a homepage with 3 blog posts, that's also an asset where you can dictate the right set of brand assets for you, and tone of voice and everything. We were always very clear about the problem we're solving. We always try to just like make everything dead simple. When someone saw our landing page where we collected emails for our waiting list, we're going to help you make product demos better, boom, and everyone just wanted to do it. It's the same concept that got us to be ranked first on Product Hunt twice, just as we launched, and a couple of months later when we launched a wider platform. Everything just kept coming back, to it's not just having a cool design, and it's not just getting a press release up somewhere. It's really putting heart and thought into your language and how you broadcast things to your audience.
So what's interesting there is with Walnut, it's about how to make your presentations, your demonstrations better, right? And what you were able to do is gain a huge waiting list before the product was ready. So did you have like small demos that you used in order to build that waiting list? Or how did you convince people to join the waiting list before the product was ready?
So I think that's kind of the thing with the waiting list. Everyone just loved the concept of what we were starting to build out. And we were getting like emails from VPs at Fortune companies saying, this sounds amazing. Like, how come, how can it be you guys are the first ones to do it? Like, this is really, really needed. And then with the product hunt and with the press release of announcing our first 2 million in seed, and everything just kind of connected. As a marketer, I was also in charge of this connection. So, we collected leads on HubSpot. We sent a newsletter using MailChimp, and we had a lot of inbound traffic from all kinds of sources. And it was a cool operation. I think it cost us like 10K overall, everything all together, going above the radar and gathering such a huge waiting list.
And for the people listening who aren't fully aware of what Walnut is or what Walnut does, could you describe that to us?
Right. So that's a good question. So we help sales teams demonstrate their products in a way that will put their prospect in the center. So if the prospect is from a certain industry or a certain size, has a certain need, he doesn't need to see the same boring generic product. And people lose a lot of deals that way. Or even if you manage to use some of R&D's or product's time to try and customize a demo for a client, you could still go up and then someone push something into production and your product will freeze during a live call with Microsoft or whatever. And so we're giving them like a cloud environment that's separate from their backend, where they can customize, drag and drop their actual SaaS dashboard. So they would not need anyone's, product design or R&D's favors. The team leaders have insights into how the demonstrations are going. There's a closing loop with CRMs. Yeah, it's something that we kind of just started recently, but turned out to be a whole industry in the tech space.
So I'm just laughing there because my background used to be as a CRM consultant, and the amount of presentations and demos I did in the past where it would start to freeze, it would slow down. And you always say the line of, oh, it doesn't normally happen like this. And usually it's true. But what you find is whenever it's a demo, whatever could go wrong does go wrong. And like, even from my personal experience in my old job, I can see how much that is needed to have that secure environment where you can also spin it up, because I can see the exact same thing where we used to do demos. And if we were doing a demonstration to a company, but using a different branding or a made up company, it's nowhere near as effective because they want to understand how is it going to work for them. And it's just, for me, the concept of if you can do this very rapidly, and I believe you can in Walnut, right? You can just change the branding and the color system, all of those kind of things within the product, which means that each demo looks as if it's been done specifically for the potential client.
Yeah, that's one of the things. I think that personalization is where this whole industry is going. I think that serving the demo to your prospects, even they don't even have to go on a call with you. You can just like embed it on one of your product pages in your website. They can play with the demo that you've created and then decide if they want to convert and leave their email. And if you talk to them now, they'll be like hundreds of % more eager to to go ahead in the funnel, because they actually saw the product and they saw a snippet of the product that you wanted them to see, which puts you in a really strong position, as opposed to getting them, click an ad, read a little bit on your website, and then convert without even realizing what the product does.
Yeah. And you mentioned that it can be done before you having a call with them, but you also use it to secure contracts as well, right? For that last stage of when somebody's not sure between two different products what they're going to go for, and the ability to see the actual product or what it will look like in the future is obviously a massive help in just closing that imagination gap. And I always think that the more the potential client has to think about it, they have to imagine what it's going to look like, the more resistance there is. So that's a really important gap that's being closed there. And did that come from, so you came from the sales experience, and you said that in the marketing side, you were generating a lot of leads and you were seeing that the conversion wasn't quite there. So were you then researching into that and trying to understand from the marketing agency of why that was happening? And what were the kind of key things that you learned in that process?
So I was seeing, it was many years ago, but I was seeing that companies spent the most amount of money until someone actually saw a glance of their product, and then everything kind of broke. And it's definitely a thought that I carried for many years and just never done anything about, until me and my co-founder started interviewing VP sales from 70 companies and asking them about the difficulties in their jobs. Yeah, I can tell you, in terms of how this new landscape is progressing. I know that a group of almost 1,000 CMOs was surveyed a couple of weeks ago, and they were asked about the struggles for next year, and suddenly the vast majority said, embedding demos on our website. And it's just crazy to see how, a tiny idea that you had, and people at first were like, maybe it sounds good, maybe it's not going to be useful, and maybe it will, and who cares? But eventually it turns out to be a whole new technology sector. And yeah, so right now we're helping both Fortune companies, smaller startups. Things are looking pretty amazing.
On the practical side, because you had so many people on the waiting list, how are you able to serve them, or what kind of process did you put into place to not get overwhelmed right at the very beginning? Because obviously you needed to build up the team.
So yeah, it was a long waiting list, and it's also something to consider, right? You can't really work with everyone. You barely have a product, and you don't want to burn bridges by not providing value, and it's very stressful. Like not having demand for your new MVP is stressful, but having too much demand for it is also something that can be a little bit toxic to your roadmap and to your priorities. And so what we did, we just dove in, and it was just like us founders with the very first employees and everything, and we kind of just looked at the personas in each and every client. So first of all, in terms of geography, the terms of which team reached out to us, if it's marketing, if it's sales, if it's product, the size of the company, the value that we will get from their logo in case we go and raise more funds, which we did. So we just kind of, prioritized everyone. We really did not choose a big number to start with. We had a couple of design partners at first when we had the MVP. But lucky for us, the value was so great that we just started onboarding more and more and more, and everything happened since.
So the founder of Entrepreneur's Handbook he was the head of marketing at Hopin. So Hopin is the fastest growing European startup ever. And he calls it, what you've just mentioned there, roadmap marketing, where you're looking at what logos you can get, because then that obviously helps you to get more clients and to get funding. And then was that informing your process as well in terms of the building the product, where you prioritize the different features that those people would benefit from the most? Was it agile in that aspect?
Yeah, so I think we never actually made a full decision just based on if it will help us raise funds later on, because for us it was clear we're on a path where raising funds will not be the main problem. And so it was more, I would say it's 80% value to us as a company, if it's a good case study for us, if it's a good use case for the MVP that we had. And then 20% would, of course, they will go to, if it's an impressive logo. But it was not really dictating our actions. But it was a nice part of it.
Yeah. In terms of the case studies that you've used in the past or clients you've had, have you got any in particular where you could see a massive difference in terms of their ability to convert? And could you walk us through how that happened for them?
I think that with our enterprise customers and Fortune customers, the immediate value was super fast. Like the immediate value was definitely cutting lots of resources, time, and pain in the communication that's between sales team and anyone from backend, so R&D, product design. So we cut them. For one customer told us he was spending $4 million a year building out a team that was supposed to support salespeople in their demos, make sure everything stays stable, and it was not stable and that's why they switched to Walnut. In terms of cutting down the sales time, by a few good couple of weeks, like you literally have you have significantly less steps to take in your sales funnel. If the salesperson can just take care of the demo on their own, and they're the boss of the process, and they don't need to, bargain with anyone from R&D. Can you please help me now instead of your own roadmap? So saves them so much time.
Yeah, and I remember that from my earlier days of when you were working on a project and the sales guy wanted you to quickly make this feature for a demo, and there was always a little bit of friction there. So by using Walnut, that eliminates some of that friction, which just helps everybody to focus on what their priorities are as well, rather than splitting their focus in multiple directions. So looking at how Walnut's grown, so you got, I believe, 15 million in funding earlier this year. Is that correct? Yeah. And what's the roadmap looking like? So what are you using that money to do, and how are you going to grow further?
So one of the main things that we're trying to do is cope with the inbound demand. Like we have hundreds of leads coming in every month, and I would definitely account them to a lot of different things, from brand to making a lot of noise to providing value in our different messages, and a lot of referral for customers. And so there's a lot we need to do in order to keep up with the demand and always evolve the platform. Like we're not just building, an editor for demos. We're building an actual platform that requires integrations and requires a lot of different features. And there's a lot to do because the market right now looks up to us and says, all right, this is going to be a major thing in sales. Let's see how it evolves. And so you need funding in order to evolve.
Yeah. And what are some of those steps you're going to take? So let's say in the next 5 years, where do you imagine that Walnut could end up, and how would it be part of the tech stack that enterprises and startups need?
So that's definitely the end game, like you just said, being part of the sales stack, so your main player for the top CRM, and your main player for analyzing voice calls with your customers. And then I do think that the future holds a big player for how you showcase your products, and everything that's about like product-led growth, anything that's about all kinds of different movements that are converging now. I think this is a major part of the future sales stack. Obviously, us and every other player right now is, they're still young, right? Like we're all like 1.5-year-old tops, and a lot of newer players that are a couple of months old. But someone will definitely take over this market.
Do you think the pandemic had much of an effect on the growth of your business and how you went about things?
Oh yeah, for sure. It's like, we analyzed a couple of different reasons for why we had such a successful start. And the growth of SaaS is clear, but there was also the growth of selling remotely. And the fact that, all of the lines were crossed. Like suddenly there was no inside sales versus field sales. Like everything was done from home. There was no flying out to show your physical product or physically opening a laptop and showing a demo. Everything was done from Zoom. And this is where companies were struggling to find products to make everything much, much more sleek and optimized. And definitely, I do think that's one good thing out of this, horrible pandemic.
Yeah, and what's interesting as well is that so many of these trends look to be continuing into the future. So it's almost caused a potentially permanent shift in the way people think about things, where as you said before, somebody might fly to another country to bring their laptop to show a demo. Whereas now, in most cases, that's not going to be justifiable in terms of the expense of that. So it means that this market is going to continue to grow. And in terms of building your actual business, so you've got offices in Tel Aviv, I believe. And did it affect you in that regard as well, in terms of how you're going to expand and what locations you're looking at and the remote working and how you handled building a company when you might not have been able to see all your employees for long periods?
We're based in Tel Aviv, but also based in the US in a couple of locations, and in Europe a couple of locations. So we're very distributed, and so from day one everything was kind of remote and hybrid. So it's not affecting us, like it's not a classic Tel Aviv based startup.
How did you do that expansion to start with, in terms of, you said there's bases in Europe and bases in the US? Is that from the founding team that there's somebody in those countries, or how did you set up those systems?
So we have a VP sales that was our first guy in, and he's in New York, and we have an amazing pre-sale team based around Utah, and we have amazing developers working remotely based around Amsterdam, Switzerland, Europe. It kind of happened naturally and gradually, but also kind of fast. Like everything happened really fast. So we just, when we saw we have like presence across different locations, then we just went along with it. And also, nobody really asked us, right? There's a remote thing going on. There's a pandemic. We can have our own opinions of it, whether it would be more fun to have 100 people sitting in the same office having pizza, talking about Game of Thrones. But nobody's really, the founders are not in charge of the work environment right now. It's more of the actual employees that are leading the way in how they want to take it, and and obviously the situation in the world. And you just have to manage. You have to cope with it, and you have to build a culture with all of the different struggles.
In the next, say, like year you've got coming up now, what's the big things you're working on or looking towards?
We're working on launching something new and amazing, which I'm not really in a place to share at this moment, but major improvements and developments with our product, trying and scale our whole customer operation. So now we work with almost 100 SaaS companies, including Fortune companies, trying to get it into the hundreds in the short range of time. Complete blitz scaling, hyper growth, and all of that, all of those good buzzwords.
You mentioned, like, in your previous marketing agency, that you learned from a lot of the mistakes. What are some of the mistakes that the people listening today need to avoid early on in their careers?
I think that being afraid of doing mistakes is one of the worst mistakes founders, can make. I hear a lot of young founders, and they're like, I'm trying to avoid doing this, I'm trying to avoid doing that. And I just tell them, if I would avoid all that, no, I would not learn in any way. It's not something, you don't go to college and become the next entrepreneur, right? You have to do these things. You have to get your hands dirty. You have to hire the wrong people, fire slower than what you had to do, and make wrong marketing decisions. All of these things, you're better off doing so much early on in your career when there's not that impact, and focus on on your next thing. I'm really happy that Walnut is my third run. I think that I'm doing a lot of things otherwise than what I would have done if it was my first time. So definitely do not be afraid to make mistakes. Learn from them. Don't cry about them. They mean a lot for the future ones.
What's changed in your own management style since your first startup compared to Walnut?
I didn't really have a style. I was just, saying whatever I had to say. I was very emotional. I was not that employee friendly. At first I was not that employee friendly. If a client would leave, I would go mad. And then later on, I became too friendly. I became really good friends with the employees, and it was a lot of mess. I was in my early 20s. Everything's growing so fast. You make money. Everything seems nice, but it's really not how you should manage a company. Like, you have to be very professional. You have to know the fine lines between over friendly, not friendly enough. You have to know how to deliver bad news and bad feedback to people. And it's kind of an art that you get with time. Like I said about the mistakes, build your first thing, fail, build your next thing, do it better. your next ones are going to be, you're going to be a much better CEO than anyone who had not has this experience.
You mentioned the tone of your first company was more kind of funny and rude. What's the tone of Walnut, and what made you decide on taking that kind of tone?
So I wouldn't say now. I would say it has a little bit of a funny language to it, a very confident language, tone of voice that educates the market, about what we want to educate. But we try not to take ourselves too seriously. That's one guiding light that we have in the company. We have an amazing head of marketing that was at Wix for many years, managing a lot of people and doing a lot of brand work there. I really think there's a lot of amazing companies out of Israel that's doing amazing positioning, like Wix and like Gong, and so we try to take that path of being a very confident and humoristic, and just not be. We try not to be a boring sales company.
That's important, right? Because it makes you more memorable. And for example, with Walnut being the toughest nut to crack, that's memorable as well because people have all these different kind of problems. There's so many different names you could potentially take. But once you said that one line, I'm going to remember that now forever, pretty much, because it makes sense. Is there anything else you did in terms of the branding of Walnut that you think really helped?
It's like a huge puzzle. It's really hard to describe step by step. When I get asked about building our brand, I just say my to-do list would probably not serve you as well, because everyone has their different products, audiences, and everything. So I would just recommend that you start day one, that you be very, very, you're very clear with your messages, and you just see how the market reacts to it, and you experiment and you adjust. But eventually, don't forget putting a lot of effort and weight into this thing before your competitors do.
You seem like you've learned most of your lessons about entrepreneurship from your own personal experience. But is there any books or podcasts, for example, that you recommend to people who are starting their journey that you think could give them a head start?
Much like every other founders, I would say How Things About How Things by Andreessen and 0 to 1. And then there was also a nice book that I read by Elad Gil. I don't remember the name, but it was for founders in the growth stage.
Is it the Hypergrowth Playbook or
I think so.
Something like that? Yeah.
I think so. Really, just top-notch tips, one by one, no bullshit. Here's a to-do list for startups in their growth phase, and that was amazing. Yeah, I would say I would count these.
Now you've got experience of running several companies. How do you keep your own balance in check? Are you somebody who will work all hours of the day to get where you need to go? Or do you find the balance helps you to do your best work?
I work every day, long hours, weekends too, but I do manage to blend it in with a couple of things that keep me sane. I'm playing guitar for a startup band that everyone is a founder. Pretty amazing, much better founders than myself, by the way. And so, we kind of mix fun with just talking about our startups. Lots of sports, boxing and jogging and everything.
Can you tell us more about this startup band? Because that's the first time I've ever heard of something like that. Who's in that band, and do you have different positions? Do you play at concerts or bars?
Yeah, so for several years now, we've been meeting every certain day of the week. And like I said, I'm on the guitars. We have a pianist that he has a very successful startup in the e-commerce space. There are like 150 employees now. We have a drummer who is a founder of one of the most successful productivity apps right now, and etc. And we meet every week. We do rock and roll, and we talk about startups, and it's pretty amazing.
Yeah. Have you played together like at an event as well, or is it more kind of a personal thing that you do together as a bonding exercise?
So we have a producer that's pretty professional, and we also played a couple of small gigs just to see how it works out. It was fun. I think that the last gig we did was like 3 days before Corona hit Israel, so that's where it stayed. But yeah, we still meet and play around.
Is guitar something you've done your entire life or for a long period, or did you start it because of the band?
Totally everything. I think I was like 15 when I started playing guitar, And in my previous generation of myself, I was hoping to be an artist or, playing guitar, being an actor, something like that. But the 21, when I hit the 21 age mark, then everything, luckily for me, everything just happened otherwise.
Yeah, and what I think is really interesting there is about how people often try to make friends in the startup world because they want something in particular. Whereas what you've done instead is you've made this band where you're all bonding over something you enjoy anyway. And I guess that makes it much more sustainable in the long run because it's not just about business. There's also the friendship behind that too. And you think that kind of support group has been a big influence in helping you in your career.
Amazing, really amazing friends of mine.
Were you all friends before you started in business, or did you meet each other because of business?
No, we just met. Every one of us knew about the other guy's startup just from afar. And then one of them was searching for a drummer, and then they were searching for a bass player, and kind of the word started spreading, and we just bonded up. We met for the first time. We decided a playlist of songs that we all liked, and we just kind of bonded in the rehearsal room for the first time.
Yeah. And with your co-founder as well, with the CTO, what was the traits that you think that worked well between you to make you a good team and to be able to build Walnut effectively?
I think we complete each other in many ways. One of us taking like the whole business and marketing and, funding and everything. One of us taking the whole umbrella of R&D and product. And first of all, these are the qualities that I was looking for in a co-founder. We complete each other in all kinds of ways. Otherwise, I like to make noise and, make our startup famous, bringing in lots of customers. He loves to execute according to, roadmaps and plans. And so everything is really balanced in our company. And I think that the team members really appreciate it. Like they can choose all kinds of different ways to do their work. And all of our team members completely overachievers. And we're very proud to be running such a team. And yeah, we're all functioning just like one big ship.
It's been a pleasure to talk to you. Where can people hear more about you yourself and also Walnut and what Walnut is doing?
So I'm available on the different social profiles, LinkedIn, Twitter, and others, and walnut.io is where people can find more information.
Awesome. Thank you for coming on again.